Hello, good evening. Welcome to 20 Minutes Live, another night on 20 Minute Live, where conversation around how to develop our space would happen. You know, that the responsibility of us having a developed space is our sole responsibility. When I mean our sole responsibility, I mean it's the job of the citizens, right? The citizens would have to take responsibility for the state of the space, and we cannot, when we come together and have this conversation, we cannot be pointing at any other person apart from pointing at us, even if it's at the point where we take this responsibility and we not disputing the fact that it's our job to protect our space and to develop it. That's when we would be able to do the necessary things on how to get the looters, out of the political arena and some other elements that would not be about the interest of our space. In fact, that is when we'll make decision on us stopping some certain things within us that will start making personal adjustment that would in a way make national contribution towards development. And that's what we should be about. That is the consciousness. But it will start with the consciousness. It will start with us knowing, you know, it will start with us knowing that we can do something and knowing that we are even part of the problem, admitting that how we got here as a space, um, we have our own share of our contribution to this, to the states that we have as a space. We actually contributed to this, via our inactions and our actions. In some cases, some person would say, but I wasn't part of those people who contributed to this actively. But you were also not part of the people who were doing something constructively towards our space. You were not also part. So silence is consent, and we should stop arguing about this and own up to our responsibility in fixing our space. So every night I come online and share my own contribution. Majorly, who am I doing this for? I'm actually not doing this for my generation, and I'm not doing it for older generation. Actually, I have a picture of mine, so I'm not expecting so much. You just have to have it. If my generation begins to use it, maybe it's a plus, but they are not the primary target. I believe that there will be a generation, hopefully soon, that will be this conscious about their space, that will be in love with their space, and that would really want to do the work to develop their space. And at that point in time, I do not want them to lack the intellectual or how to go about it. And that is what I'm doing this for. I'm doing this for posterity, and not just now, not just now, right? So, and that would justify the reason why I'm not bothered about whether likes or followers or mm, those are secondary. The primary thing is that I'm creating content that will be useful in the nearest future to the generation that will be interested in using it. That is my target. That's my primary target. So let's continue on the conversation. Developing our space religion. That this institution and this sector should not be swept under carpet. They have something to answer. They have something to play. They have a part to play. And so far, so good without mincing words, right? They've not played that role. Well, constructively. They've actually played a role, if we have over 15 million children outside school, with the population we claim to have with the religious, and 20 years ago, this was not the same. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, before the institution became what it is, we didn't have this record. We didn't have this record of more number of people living in absolute poverty, extreme level of poverty. Then it means that they've done a job and they have actually achieved very well, considering that before they became these ramparts, around our space, people were migrating, but it was not a menace as it is right now. That for you to have some level of meaning to life, you have to consider Japa, you have to consider, and it takes some level of courage to refuse the syndrome right now, because it's a syndrome. And I wonder how people say people cannot beat social vices. Were you able to beat yours? Your children too might not be able to beat theirs. So regardless of what they consider their own social vices to be, and submit to their social pressure in doing those things, you were not able to beat yours. So what do you think would you are getting, right? So back to the point, religion hasn't played any role positive so far, and that is the truth. That is not just the truth, that is a fact within our space. Take it anywhere, look at the record, look at what they will be sharing our testimony. You would see a community. In 1992, people were sharing, even though it was Beatles, but around our space we were using brand new cars, right? Just 1992, with the so-called acclaimed God, all we will be celebrating is Tokumbo Second. In fact, the way people celebrate Tokumbo now is like brand new. Some person would even tell you, it's like brand new. What are you expecting? But that's not the conversation this night. So let's look at why this institution that promised so much, but will be unable to deliver, and it hasn't delivered. Why is it that it failed? For me personally, like I said, I do not believe that any form of escapism is positive and has an edge over the other, right? I do not agree with it. I believe escapism in itself is distraction and should not be something you just want to jump into and start doing. I believe that escapism is destructive. Whatever takes you from reality, especially, will give you the idea that you could permanentize that instead against your reality. You could start making that and adopt that as your new reality, as cheated you in life. And then I believe that strongly. That is what people get into drug addiction. That is what they would fall for. They would usually fall to a point where they believe that they could now permanentize this, because they got satisfaction going by economics, what is called diminishing return. The more it's certain, the more you feel like you need to take in, because the first level of derived satisfaction would have to be doubled and increased. The expectation now is high, so you have to double it the next time you use it. And the more you continue using such, the more you get into it and you feel lost at some point into it. And that is the same thing. You start from a particular day of watching, and then after some time you realize that is no longer doing you. Then you add another day add to it. Then before you know it, it's now every day of the week for religion. That is absurd. That is unfortunately, that's what we have in our space. But what would not make it work? I want to consider that a generation will come, they will pick this as their forms of escapism, and they would understand it for what it is. That is just a form of escapism, nothing more, nothing less, right? And they would say, how can we constructively use our form of escapism? And that I also believe that escapism can be used as a tool to get a certain result. And at that point, that it would be considered, that its operation will be considered to be positive. It's at that point I will consider the operation of it, not the entity of it, the operation of it in that way to resolve a particular issue in reality. And that is when it's going to be positive. So I believe that some persons will get to the point where they'll feel like, oh, if this thing is not playing a role, let's discard it. And if it can actually now play a role, what role should it be playing towards us helping towards developing our space or having a developed space? And that is what we should be looking at, right? So how do we get to that point? How do we resolve it? So first, we need to begin to ask questions on what will be the driving force of religious beliefs within our space. If you can answer those questions, if you can identify them positively, what we just do is to re-engineer it. So for instance, right now as we speak, what does religion drive on? Does it drive on fear or love? Be honest. Why are you religious? And except if you are not honest, and I'm going to re-echo it to you. If you do not pay tithe, things will be tight to you. If you do not pay tithe, you are going to hellfire. Someone would echo that, and there will not be an opera, right? And the same thing, if you do not pray 5 times daily, paradise is not sure for you. And if you miss the Ramadan festive, Ramadan fasting, then heaven or paradise is not sure for you. So these things will drive on fear. Now the question we should ask ourselves is that in an environment where it is hard for us to confront our leaders, especially our political leaders, that it is hard for us to make requests, it is hard for us to fit in and behave as citizens, what study of knowledge, what should be the role of all this escapism in helping us do? Let me give you an instance. In creating love of boldness, because we could also interchange it, fear or boldness, love or war, sort of. So in creating boldness within our space, a whole lot of people believe in the potency of getting drunk to create boldness than to be religious. And I've seen it. One of the most timid people I've ever met. One of the most timid people. The way they talk is timid. They are afraid for everything and anything. One of the most timid people are the ones who claim that they have God in the name of religion. One of the most timid people are around our space. Very extremely timid. In fact, if there is anything stronger than timidity, we should label them as that. They will be very timid. And check people who act boldly, even though they might be stupid at some point. Check them out. The result speaks for themselves. That these ones are the ones who are using other substance. Let me give you an instance. One of the major religious leader in this country came out and said the reason he could not prophesy, in quotes, I'm quoting him, that there will be something called COVID in 2020 is that he saw it, but he was afraid of FBI. He said it, I didn't say it. He said he was afraid of FBI. So if the so-called, in quote, the top religious leader would be afraid, who are you not to be afraid if you practice that kind of, or if you belong to that kind of institution? You would definitely be afraid. And we don't need that kind of institution that spread fear in our environment. This is not an environment that can survive with such people within our space. We need an environment where people will be committed to having the space develop. Let me give you an instance, and this will be contrary to all the nations that are developed. Check Americans. For you to win a conversation about America with Americans, you would almost literally put them to sleep before you can win any conversation about it. And this commitment level of every other nations that are growing is high. Check what happened at Israel or in Israel recently, that the major tech owners, major business owners decided to take a break from work and join the war. The same thing also happened in Ukraine, that major professionals in these countries would volunteer themselves to fight the war, meaning they believe in protecting their country. They have boldness, strong boldness. Check Africans within these spaces. They will be jackpying for their life. They will be running away for their life. Why? Don't blame them. It's the things, institutions that form their mindset. Their mindset is filled with fear. And that is the same thing that would happen within our space. And it's the same thing, exactly the same thing that is happening within our space. This is not a space that would accommodate such. So that is why religion would not produce would not be effective, because the things they would drive on is on fear. The more timid you are, the more money for the religious leaders, the more progress it makes. And that is not helping our space. Because at the end of the day, you've produced timid people. Another word for timid people are slaves. And what does a slave want to do? A slave wants to beg for social amenities. I was on a space earlier today, and someone was saying education is a privilege. And I was like, what the heck is this one? As in, what kind of thing formed the people's mind within our space? What kind of information are we consuming? And it's religion. Listen to them. Not long they are going to tell you the kind of religion they are practicing, and it will only be promoting fear and timidity, lack of courage to protect one's country and one's interest, the interest of your space. Those are not the people we should be. That is not the kind of institution we should be reinforcing. That's an institution we should remove their power. So when we get to the point where we want to use religion as an escapism tool to help us develop, then we would need to change this driving force and tell people, for whatever reason you have to share, for whatever information you have to share, stop sharing them on the basis of intimidating people, on the basis of fear. Start sharing it on the basis of love. Give people option. You tell me, if I do not do this, I'm going to hell. Who told you I'm not already in hell? Says who? Says who that many people will not gladly pick hell? And it's already happening. You destroy the whole generation on the basis of fear message and messages. And you think you have a developed country. You will not. Who will build country? People. And when you kill the morale of the people, when you have killed their humanity in them, what do you think would happen? They will come out and be begging for their livelihood. They will be begging to live, to be human. And that is exactly what has happened within our space. And that is the crime that this so-called institution keeps committing and is still committing within our space. So just before I bring this to a close, lastly, why is religion not working? Because in every of the religious books, go and check it, every of religion, especially the popular one within our space, we are not the described and protagonist. In every of the religious book, black people, Nigerians specifically, when I mean Nigerians, I'm still talking about being black, are described as the villain, as the omota, as the area boy, as the antagonist of the play. You think that does not have a psychological problem, the psychological effect? That has a psychological effect. In fact, in one of the tools of psychological warfare, that is a major part of psychological warfare. Demonize the people, demonize them, and they will feel weakened. Describe them in the way you want them to perceive themselves, and very soon they will start believing you. Even though these were lies, but we have started believing these lies. If you ask an African, who is the devil? And some people did this stats, right? I'm not making it up. It's already there. They did this survey. Ask a black African child that is religious, that you have indoctrinated with religion. Ask that child, what does the devil looks like, or who does the devil looks like? He's going to point to a black person. He's going to point to himself, unfortunately, and tell him or her to point to the protagonist of the play in any of these two religious books. He's going to point to someone else other than himself. That is psychological warfare against him. That already is telling him that he is good for nothing but to cause chaos. He is not good enough to build. That's why some persons actually believed, if they have sold the lies to some persons, that the countries that are developed were developed by angels, they will have believed it. That the countries that are developed today, that are working, seemingly having good economy, if they tell those people that it's angels and God who came on earth to develop it, some people will believe it. And if you ask some persons, it's not that some person will believe it. These are things that people have told me before. A man in his 50s, in his uselessness, said, and I quote, that this is a place created for devil. And when he was talking about it, he was talking about this place, and he was talking confidently that this place was created for devil. But those places that are working, those European, God made it. But he will be too confused. And this is where people will be confused. This is where you would know that we have been indoctrinated by this virus and this escapism called religion. He will be too confused to also stone himself in the leg. And he will say, but this is where the natural resources, or the best natural resources is. So I asked him, I said, pick one. He will be a confused man. And that was exactly how I asked him. He will be a confused man. Pick one. You said devil, this place is made for devil. And you said that this is where the best natural resources also would be. No, your God must be that God you are describing must be a confused God. Must be a God that must be coming out of his senses and going back of it. That means he forgot something. How can he say that he designed a hell on earth, but he forgot to put the natural resources, the best of natural resources, in the heaven that it defined? No, something must be wrong with you. Let me tell you what is wrong. Let me now tell you what is wrong. This is the best place that God has created. Africa is the best place on planet Earth that God invested in. If there is going to be a proof that there is a creator, and the creator made a perfect world, in a place. Africa is that place that have been extremely blessed. But what would happen in Africa is that Africans will be sold a lie that we are the demon of the earth. And over time, systemically, over time, we will start believing in these lies. And when you believe it and it's being told to you almost every day, over and over again, by the religious bandits and the stupid ones that do not even know the psychological effect they are causing within our environment, by teaching the things they are teaching year in, year out, over time, people are going to believe these lies and people are going to begin to act it out. So that is why a Nigerian will tell you, no, this place cannot be developed again. This place cannot be developed. It's beyond repair. This place cannot be developed. And then he will be talking as if he's a smart person. And he's not smart. I have read. When I mean I have read. There is no problem we are experiencing now that is peculiar to us. People develop places. Even some people got into worse scenarios than we are in right now. And they made up their mind that they were going to develop it. The day we make up our mind, we are going to develop it. But what should be in place? What should help us making up our mind? This institution called religion. At least if you cannot help us, you should leave us. But you cannot even leave us. I'm not saying leave us at this point. Come and do the real job you are supposed to do. You have done the damage. Come and do the reverse engineering. Come and undo your work that you have done. Religion has done the damage. And the damage will be caused by its the driving force of religious beliefs within our space. And the driving force will be first on fear, war, and demonizing us. Going forward, if Christ does not look like me, I will stop believing in Christ. That is exactly what I did. That I am your God that you read in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 27. That is what I describe it as. Whatever religion within my space that do not describe me as that God, that says that I do not have anything in common with that God, that is no God within our space. That is not a worthy God, worthy enough to worship. You must stop demonizing Africans. And you must stop demonizing yourself. We must take back that strength and that power to be our own protagonists and not our antagonists. For me, I never even prayed it. The prayer of fear, the prayer of enemy. I never prayed it because how can something tell me that the people who look like me are my enemy? And I would accept it. I must be out of my senses for me to accept that. I've never prayed it. In the 15 years I used in the religious called Christianity, I never prayed it. Of course, the prayer was being raised, but I will pray something else. I will say something else. Over time, till I left it eventually. So, going forward, this methodology must be changed. Yes, the driving force must stop. The driving force is not that I cannot be worshiping the God of Israel in Nigeria. I cannot be worshiping the God of Saudi Arabia in Nigeria. The driving force must change and expect Nigeria to develop. I should only worship God of Nigeria. And if that God can be adapted, if their God can be adapted, if there is another adaptable version of their God in my space, yes, it can work. But if none, keep it where it is, or go to where you want to worship it. Go to Israel and go and worship it. Become a citizen and you will know how far. Go to Saudi Arabia and go and worship it and you will know how far. I will not say ordinary Libya. Libya is Libya. Even in Libya, try it. Muslim nation. Go and try it there and see how far. So if you cannot develop it, if whatever you hold high does not have the interest of your space at heart, why then do you protect such? If not madness. Just like I said yesterday, for me, the religious within our space must be not and must be done. But that's not the conversation this night. The conversation is fixing the driving force, knowing why it's not working, and profiling the solution. So reverse engineering fear, start using love. Start saying whatever you cannot teach out of love, then stop teaching it. If I cannot teach, if I believe so much in something and I'm convinced that that thing exists and that the only way I can teach it in order for people to get me will be fear, I will stop. I would not share it at all. Whatever you cannot teach with love. With love mean whatever people cannot have their consent or their own decision to it or their own idea to it, cannot ask questions. That's not love. That is you taking the liberty from them. And we must stop that. And especially, we must stop any religious beliefs that is holding people back and describing them as the villain, as the antagonist in the story. They were not the one who wrote it. And you believe that to be true. Stop that rubbish. That rubbish must stop. And in my lifetime, it's going to stop. Yes, it's going to stop. So, till we see tomorrow, this is 20 minutes live. And I am Shewa Ilara. I like to call myself a revolutionary. Let's end this with the national pledge. I pledge to Nigeria, my country, to be faithful, loyal, and honest, to serve Nigeria with all my strength, to defend our unity and uphold our honor and glory. So help me, my ancestor.